this electrical video is going to be quite technical because I'm going to let Pedro explain everything that he's done. So if you're not into technical stuff, then this is probably not the video for you. So just give this one a skip and come back when we're doing something a bit more woody. I don't know. But yeah, if you're interested, yeah, look, because he's a very, very knowledgeable guy, and you can see what he's done. There you go. All right, that's the intro done, and then over to Pedro. Hope you enjoy this video.
Okay, this is our 24 volt battery. It's individual 6 volt batteries, Rolls batteries, and we've got 4 in each bank to give us 24 volts. So we've got 3 banks, 1, 2, 3, and they're giving us, each bank will give us 215 ampere hours at 24 volts. So we've got 3 of those, so our total capacity is going to be 645, is that right? Something like that.
Something like that, amperes.
Yeah.
And it's 24 volt because we're using a truck engine, which is...
Yeah, the core system on the boat is 24 volt, and that's
volts.
really regulated by what the engine is. So if you're going to redo a boat, you're a bit stuck with the engine being 24 volt, charging system being 24 volt off the engine, so you would stick with 24. 24 is a slightly better voltage to use than 12 because you're drawing less amps and you can use slightly smaller cable, etc. You can obviously have a 24 volt system and then a separate 12 volt system, but then you're into 2 alternators on the engine, etc, etc. So these are connected up in 3 separate banks. They're connected up with to a buzz bar each end. So we've got a negative buzz bar this end and a positive buzz bar this end. And this is so that all the cables are of equal length. So each cable is the same length as every other cable, which means that each bank should charge at the same rate at the end of the day, to give them all an equal chance of being one big battery. We've got a vent in this because there's quite a lot of batteries in here, even though it's in the engine room. Good idea to put a vent in to get rid of any gassing from the batteries. You need to look at the batteries on a fairly regular basis. At least once a month you would need to check the individual cells to make sure the water is up in the cells. It wants to be about half an inch or so above the plates, which you can see through the little caps which you can take off. Okay, so that's pretty much the battery.
Yeah.
It then comes out of the battery. It's always a good idea to have a lid, and you can notice all the terminals have got covers on them, so that in case you do drop anything on it, you're not going to have a major disaster. Okay, supply comes out of the battery. The negative continues on to a negative buzz bar. The positive, we've got an isolator here, so a local isolator, so that we can isolate this battery totally from the ship and the services in case of an emergency, whatever. There's a 300 amp fuse in here to protect this cable circuit, and any untowards happens on the receiving side of the battery. Here we've got a small fuse box, which is an always live fuse box. So this can't be turned off by isolating the battery. And we'll use this for bilge pumps, etc., so that the bilge pumps will always be live. So you can isolate, if you leave the boat, you can isolate the rest of the boat, but you'd always have a supply to the bilge pumps. And these have got little individual fuses in to protect the circuits again. If you need to isolate that, there's a small fuse just there, which you just pull out, and that will take all the power off of this as well. Okay, next thing, then all this then goes to this, which is our DC link box. all the auxiliary systems come in and out of this box, and it's a pretty neat way of just, let me just undo this, it's a neat way of distributing and enabling you to put charging systems in and out of the battery. Okay, now, so the battery power now is coming out of here via the switch into the fuse box. It's then coming along, and this boat already had isolators fitted into it, and they are accessible from the wheelhouse. Now I've left those in so that if there was any major emergency, whatever, instead of having to come down the engine room, you could isolate the supply to the engine and to the distribution by isolating these switches. So it's something you've got to remember when doing any work on it, that there are 2 isolators in each system, which is a little bit more complicated than what you'd like, but it's also it's got its pros and cons anyway. Also, there's a third isolator in here which links the engine battery to the auxiliary battery. So if you had in a system where the engine batteries were flat, you could put that link on, and then you could use the main battery to start the engine, and vice versa. If this was, for any reason, there was no power in the main auxiliary battery, you could turn that on and use the engine battery bank to supply radios or whatever in case of an emergency, etc., etc. Okay, so then it continues on and it comes into our link box. Our link box has got 2 buzz bars in it. This is a common negative. All the batteries' negatives are all connected together basically. So the engine battery, the auxiliary battery, and also there's a bow thruster battery again, and they're all linked. All the negatives are linked to here, so they're all common. Okay, now this is our battery, a main battery coming into the positive buzz bar, and this is just the auxiliary system now, nothing else. And each of these are either inputs or outputs, and as you can see they're all fused. So we've got the alternator supply coming in, we've got the multi-charger coming in and out. This is a multi-charger inverter, so this is connected into the common buzz bar. So the power would come down here into this fuse here, which is going to protect it, into the positive buzz bar, along and out and back in to charge the battery. If we're using that as an inverter, then obviously the power is going to go the other way. It's sucking power out the battery down here and out into the multi to then act as an inverter, where it turns it into 240 volts there for our plugs and sockets in the event we lose any shore power, or we haven't got shore power, or we haven't got our generator running. Then the other things coming in here are the alternator, which is coming from this split diode box. So the alternator comes into this, and these are basically super duper diodes in here, so that the batteries can't be backfed or connected, and you've got power coming in, and then you've got 3 individual outputs from this, one for the engine, one for the auxiliary, and one going to the bow thruster. So when the engine's running, the alternator, which is over here, big thing there, is charging all 3 batteries, hopefully. We haven't seen it running yet. The other input into here is the solar. So we've got 2 lots of solar circuits which are going to feed just our auxiliary battery. We've got 2 sets of a combination of solar panels on the roof. And they're both going to feed via this ice. There's an isolator there to isolate the power coming into the solar regulators. They then come in, they're joined together, and they just feed into the buzz bar. Again, coming into the buzz bar, going back into the auxiliary battery that way. We then got our outputs from the buzz bar. This is our auxiliary circuit, which is going to feed our auxiliary panel, which is then going to distribute the DC power to all our lights, nav lights, radios, electronics, which is connected to a distribution panel in the wheelhouse. This also has got a BMV meter connected to it, and that via this shunt here, which is in the negative side, shows us how much power is coming in and out of the battery at any one time. It'll only show us a combination of what's going in and out, so if the alternator's running and the solar's running and the charger's running, etc., it is a combination of everything. It doesn't show individual circuits as such. This has also got a facility here, which you press this little button, and all these little lights here will show whether there's a fuse gone in the circuit without having to disconnect them and test them with a meter individually, which I'll show Ian working when we get it completely flashed up. So that's that pretty much. Now the multi is fed from shore power, and it's a 70 amp charger, which is giving us enough charge when we're on shore power to keep all these batteries all topped up. It's also got a very small 4 amp output, which trickle charges the engine battery, which is over here. This is a local isolator for the multi, so this disconnects the multi from the battery, which stops it either becoming an inverter or becoming a charger. So if you're working on any of the AC systems in the boat, because they will become live when you lose shore power by the fact the inverter coming on, you really do need to make sure that this is switched off on its own isolating switch, and then come down and isolate it here, so there's no danger of the inverter kicking in and give you unexpected voltage on the AC supplies in the fuse boxes in the boat. That's that pretty much, really. So the engine battery is coming out of here, it's coming along, going into this isolator this side, which is actuated from in the wheelhouse. It's then coming down and it's going into this, which is a little DC link box for the engine battery and the engine systems. Let's have a little gander in here. On the side of this is a local engine isolator. Local isolator, so we can isolate the engine from the engine battery. There's also a little fuse up here, a push button fuse, push on, push off, which is giving us our supply up to the ignition. In the event of anything happens to the cable in between here and the helm position, that will shut off. This is the little shunt in here, which is showing us what's coming out of the alternator. So the alternator is basically coming into here, going through the shunt, and then it's going off to the auxiliary battery. We've got another common negative bus bar in here, which is taking care of all the cables coming from the engine. This is linked to this negative bus bar over here, so that's making them all common. And this is the distribution to the engine. So engine battery coming in via the isolator onto this positive bus bar, and then going off to the starter this side. And this is the power out from the alternator, going up to the split charge diode.
Okay then, a word on inverters.
Okay, this is our inverter charger, Multi Plus 2. This is the latest version of it. The older version may be a little bit easier to play with due to the fact the nice little on-off switch was on the front, and now it's hidden away under there and you can't really find it. Anyway, neither here nor there. Right, this is fed by shore power, and our shore power, we've got a 32 amp shore power supply coming in via a 3 kilowatt transformer. That then is fed down here.
That's the isolation transformer, is it?
The isolation transformer, yeah.
Yeah, which does? Well, we'll see that in a minute.
It's protecting our hull and isolating the mains completely from the boat, which is the best way to combat electrolysis or electrolysis in the hull and any earth faults, etc. This is the mains is then fed into this unit, if this senses it's got mains coming in 240 volts, it will go into its charger mode. And also there's a relay in here which clicks in and allows the 240 volts to come into this unit and come straight out again, and is fed to our AC distribution boxes inside the boat. It's got two AC outputs, so one is either mains, or when it's in inverter mode, it will supply 240 volts on AC output 1. AC output 2 is only triggered when there's mains. When we've got mains power, there's an AC output we put into a separate distribution box in the boat. So, and we're going to run things like the immersion heater and aircon off of that. It means if you lose your shore power, that you won't have any load on any power on those two circuits, but you will on the rest of it, because this, as long as it's connected to the battery and you've got it switched to on, which is inverter or charger, this will then give us 240 volts AC, which is being converted from our big battery to give us mains around the boat. You have to be a little bit careful, because converting this DC to mains uses an awful lot of power from the battery. It's drawing quite a lot of amperage, so you need to be sensible with it, not to run anything 3 kilowatt kettles, etc. So that's about that really. You don't have to do anything. It's got it's got a switch, a two-way switch on it. If you go to charger only, it means if you do lose shore power, everything will just stop. If you've got it in on the on circuit, it means the inverter will kick in. Now the inverter will kick in, you won't even know it's happened. And if you're not here, or the boat is unattended, then what will happen is all the supplies inside that are on will eventually drain this battery. So when you leave the vessel, you really want to be putting this unit to charger only option, so that it won't just go to inverter and you don't know. It's a common fault. People coming back, battery's completely flat. This won't kick in because it doesn't see there's a battery, and then really you've got to go to the old-fashioned jump start on this battery just to make this kick in. So it sounds a bit complicated, but it is quite straightforward at the end of the day. Right. Yeah. Read the book. RFTB is what they say. Okay. There's our isolators over there, which you can access from in the wheelhouse, which is probably a good thing. This is our DC distribution board. It's quite compact, 24-way, and above it we have our BV meter, which shows us the state of the battery, ampere hours left, the volts, and it shows us the voltage in the auxiliary battery and the voltage in the engine battery. And then it also shows us how much power is coming in or out of the battery at any one time, but collectively from all the inputs, i.e. alternator, solar, and the charger. If we individually switch each thing off, then we can see exactly what is coming in from each individual input, etc. So then round here is in this what's going to be a cupboard. We've got a local isolator here, which isolates. We can isolate this distribution board from this end, and then it's also got a distribution fuse in here to protect the outgoing parts of the whole of the board. And as you can see, there are individual circuit breakers, etc., which are then feeding off into lights, pumps, etc., etc., etc. This is a little 12-volt system which is fed from the 24. This drops the voltage down to 12 volts for our 12-volt supplies, i.e. Radios, maybe the VHF radio, little sockets for charging phones and things like that. And that's got its own little distribution fuse board here, which is a little 6-way to feed those things. Underneath here we've got our bathhouse, a junction box, This is fed from the 2 batteries at the front, which are for the bow thruster. We put a little meter in here with a little push button, so we push, once that isolator at the front is on, when we push that button, that will show us a rough indication of the voltage in the bow thruster battery. So with this meter and the one up there, we can basically pretty much see the voltage in all 3 of our battery banks. Okie dokie. So that's basically the 24 volt distribution. The supply from the shore comes into that box, comes out of that box into the isolate via an RCD, which is, if you like to lift that cover up here. So we've got 2 RCDs in there. One is between the shore power inlet and the transformer, and the other one is on the output of the transformer, which is protecting the circuits after the AC output after the transformer. Okay, that then is powered down to our multi. It then is switched through the multi, and then it comes back and it comes into our AC distribution boards, which are, yeah, these are pretty much household type distribution boards, but they do the job. The top one is for shore power and inverter circuits, so all the sockets and everything else will distribute from there. And this is a separate box at the bottom, which is coming from the AC2 output of the multi, which is giving us power to things, heavy duty things like the calorifier and the air conditioning. This one won't work if we haven't got shore power. If we run out of shore power, or the shore power switch is off, all this will be powered by the inverter if the inverter is in the on position. Up here we've got our remote multi-control. Now what this does, instead of us having to go down the engine room and turn the charger off or turn the multi on and off, this is a local remote switch, and we've got the ability on here to switch it to charger only or off, or we can put it on to on, which means it will invert if we lose shore power. It's also got a little control knob on here, which we can limit the amount of shore power the multi is using. So if we've only got a small 16 amp supply shore power or less, we can adjust this to from 5 amps up to 32. This is our shore power generator changeover. We've got a supply coming out of this box here, and if we go on to shore, that will supply 2 sockets in the boat for the air conditioning output. Okay, so we'll have one up here in there and one down in the bedroom, and that is coming out of this board, which will only work if there is shore power coming into the vessel. If we go to the generator, we've got a socket in the front of the boat with another RCD and distribution board, which will supply power to those 2 sockets from a generator, which can be plugged in to the front, or alternatively another shore supply. And this is separated from everything else by this double pole changeover switch, giving us the ability to have 2 shore power leads or a generator plugged in either end of the boat if we wish. That's it.
If you want to leave the boat unattended for months, you might want to have the internet still working, and so you can use remote monitoring cameras.
Well,
stuff like
it
that.
can run off. It could run off anything. So, but it would need, you need to supply it, and if it's all mains stuff, then you need you will need the inverter set up. But the main inverter would run something like that, as long as you made sure, that you had any other power sources drawing any great amount of current off. But it would only be the sockets in the boat, really. So if you had anything plugged into the sockets on the boat, you just unplug them, Okay, I mean, I don't know what you do about your fridge, depending on what you've got in the fridge.
Well, it's not going to be on the socket, is it? It's going to be...
it's on an isolator there anyway, so you can isolate that. So, I mean, there's no reason why, unless you lost your power for months, that battery would power your router for forever.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, it's not a big drawer, is it?
It's not a big drawer. As long as you know, when you left the boat, you made sure all the other heavy drawers were off in case in the event you lost your shore power and you didn't know about it.
So I made the boxes and you did everything else.
Yeah.
So we're a team, aren't we?
A
really?
team.
Yeah.
So the covers come for those. 24 volt battery again. Here we've got 220 amp hour batteries. These were original batteries on the boat. Hopefully they're going to be okay. We give them a little test and they seem to be holding up. Again, we've got a local isolator here, which is accessible, really accessible through a hole in the side of the bed. We're running this distribution from here. It's running within the floor here space to the bow thruster, which is up there in the bow. We've got solar connected directly to the battery here, which is coming from our solar regulator, little solar regulator here, again, which is fused on the input. So we're still running our solar. This is from the panels outside. They're just going to be coming down and into there. So this basically is also connected to a little distribution box here with this cover on, and inside here is a distribution fuse to the bow thruster, plus it's got the input from the engine alternator distribution diode block, which is also coming into this and feeding our batteries, which is going to charge our batteries when the engine is running. We've got a little socket in down here as well, so that in the event which is running off the ring main, we can put a little charger on here to charge these batteries if we want to via that system. But we're just hoping, the idea is hoping that the solar will keep them topped up, because they are not used an awful lot, just periodically when you're mooring up or whatever. So that's that basically. Again, we've got these vented. This box is vented into the forecastle space and then overboard from in there. And that's all there is to this little bit.
Thanks to people who are subscribing to this channel, much to my amazement, because I'm doing it for my own fun and so I can look back. And the mere fact that people are watching this and enjoying it is an amazement to me. So thanks ever so much for coming on board, subscribing and stuff. Yeah, more the merrier. Come on board. We're hopefully going to go to see some other lovely places. So hang on for the ride, eh?